Welcome back to the Asian Cards podcast. As usual, we have Brian, otherwise known as Sunday League Investors, and Eric, who is a guest on our show. So glad to have you, Eric, and as usual, glad to have you, Brian. How's life, guys?
Welcome, Eric, to the Asian Cards podcast, man. Monumental. No, I actually really want to pick your brain about F1, particularly, man, because I know you were we're literally just talking about it. I know you're into basketball, and I know you're dug deep into your basement right now. But otherwise, how's everything else going for you?
Everything's great. Appreciate Raymond you having me on, and obviously nice to meet you as well, Brian. I will. In terms of F1, I'm a new guy on the block, but it's exciting sport, if you will, at this point in time. So it's an interesting topic to discuss as well.
For sure. And Raymond, I know you've been out and about for a while, and we haven't been on this podcast for a week, right? It's been a week, or it feels
it's been a week.
It's only been a week.
I think we've been going to a lot of shows, but we'll be back to regularly scheduled programming.
Raymond's too busy for me. That's the problem.
Too many distractions in New York.
Yeah.
World traveler, yes.
Yes, you are a world traveler. But let's get into some topics, man. There's a lot to talk about. What have y'all been up to, particularly? I think I'm probably be talking about a lot of sports card shows. That might be a segue, but what else have you guys been up to?
I went to my first college basketball game yesterday at MSG. It was a doubleheader between Kansas and Michigan State, and the second game was Kentucky versus Duke. So that was a really, really cool game, and I'd never gone to a college basketball game before. Honestly, it was way more fun than watching all the NBA games I've ever been to.
Really?
So it certainly won't be the last time I've gone. Yeah, it's just the crowd is really amped up. You have tons of alumni filling the bleachers. People are very invested in the game. I think the crowd makes a huge difference.
Okay.
Yeah, college games are it's a beast of its own, right? I remember going to basketball games when I was in college, and those were obviously the best times to go as a student. Obviously, you get the best seats in the house for near nothing. But I think it's the passion, right? Professional athletes are, they're effectively, they're being paid to show up and put on a show, right? As opposed to college athletes, I won't say all of them, but most of them are still there because they love the game, right? And most of them know that they're not going to make it to the next level anyways. So they're really there to have fun and put on a show for their peers and, just take it all in, take all the experience in. So I think it overall turns into a better experience for the fans.
Yeah, and it feels like more camaraderie in these games, right? I don't know. It's different. When you're going to your school, you're cheering on your school for some reason. You feel like you're part of the reason why it's here where it is.
Yeah.
Hey, so were you scouting or something, or just kind of going there for experience? What's going on?
I was walking to Whole Foods to buy some bananas, and I saw a bunch of people wearing Duke shirts, and I looked online. And I didn't, I thought the game was happening, in North Carolina, but it was happening at MSG. So I looked it up, bought some tickets. They were $30, and just sat there for 5 hours watching two back-to-back games. We got back at 1.
In typical Raymond fashion.
It was great. How are you, Brian? What have you been doing? How was the show in San Francisco?
The San Francisco show was pretty good. I actually went to the SoCal show over the weekend, and everybody told me to not do it, as in because I was driving there. It's a 6-hour road trip. It was a tough drive, but I convinced 2 other collectors that I literally just met. I was like, I think this might be fun to do, and luckily they were like, yeah, let's do it. But you know what? Overall, LA is really worth the hype, man. It's just crazy to see. It's just crazy walking into the show, the premiere show, and thinking how it's in a small little rinky-dink gym, no AC, it's hot. I mean, these tables look so flimsy. You breathe on it, it's gonna break, right? How would you put your cards in the case there? But the people really make up for it. I've never done so many deals within an hour span for just soccer, right? Like, soccer, you gotta, when there's like 2 or 3 people, you gotta make it, you gotta be efficient. You don't really have the volume. But in this show, it really felt like soccer card collectors came out to really trade and everything. And I saw a lot of heat. Went to Burbank's. That was really cool. Unfortunately, the buyer wasn't there, so I couldn't really negotiate or anything. But man, just seeing just the whole entire vibe of LA. I was pretty much sold on LA when one of my friends was like, I was like trying to take my stuff out of the car. I was like, hey, I don't think we should leave stuff in the car. He's like, chill out. We're in LA. You're okay. I was like, I love this place.
I'm not sure if that's the smartest move, man.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have put that out there, but whatever.
Interesting. How did things go down at the premiere show? That's the one in it's the one in like Garden Grove, right?
Yeah, Westminster. Yeah, not Westminster.
Yeah,
I say Westminster and I got roasted. So just giving pro tips to everyone. I'm just giving out nuggets right at this point. But it was great. I did a lot of deals, soccer card deals. Like, I mean, there was a point where I traded into a card and literally 2 seconds later, the card was bought up. And then I recycled, just traded, bought something, and then I traded into something and someone bought something else out. And that literally never happens with other shows because, first off, there's just not that many soccer card representation, right? But yeah, everyone was really nice. I saw Sasha T there, man, but like I couldn't get to talk to him. He was a little busy. He's one of the guys I actually would love to just meet, kind of just chop it up. But if you listen to me, I'm here. Big fan. But no, overall it was good, man. I think it was worth it. Would I do a road trip back to LA? Probably not. I probably would take a flight because I know flights are a little bit cheaper, actually, to be honest. But yeah, so I would definitely go. I know Burbank's trade night is December 10th. Eric, I actually don't know where you're at, but like, maybe this is a thing that we all go to.
No, I'm based in Chicago, so obviously when the National came through, it's easy to get to. And actually a good point, because it's like how there are so many shows nowadays. It seems like if you go on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, it seems like there's a show every weekend. So it is sort of interesting to kind of get a perspective on like how do people decide on what shows to go to, and then like what is it worth it, right? And to your point, you're sort of getting into the fact of, okay, I made the trip out there this time. Maybe you don't make the trip next time, or only if it's more convenient for you. So it's kind of an interesting kind of conundrum now, because now there's a show every weekend.
Yeah, 100%.
Eric, now that there's a show every weekend, how do you decide which shows to go to? Especially, you work a full-time job, you have kids, you're married, right? It's like difficult to kind of balance everything. How do you decide to prioritize like one show over the other?
Yeah, I mean, for me, to your point, since I am busy with, just life in general, it's really just the big, like you just have to focus on the big shows, right? So obviously, no brainer is the National, right? And then you start to talk about some of the other big shows like the Dallas show, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later here. Tampa has a big show as well. And then it seems like, like I was saying earlier, it seems like every other week now there's another huge show, right? Like another 200 table show, another 300 table show. Whereas before it used to be, there used to always be regional card shows for sure all around the country. But, we're talking 15 to 30 tables. And it seems like now with the card boom, obviously in the last, let's call it 4 years even, we're starting to see just big shows pop up all the time. And, I feel like at some point it's like you sort of get show fatigue or just like carded out.
Burnout.
Just a burnout, And so, 100%. For me, it's like even going to just the huge shows, you could tell that folks are still just burned out from the past weekend because they were just in, Shipshawana, Indiana, and there was a 100-table show there and they did a ton of deals. But then, but you have to show up at Dallas, right? Because it's a huge market, that there's going to be people there willing to deal. So you got to keep the ball rolling, so to speak. But for me, I mean, personally, that's how I approach it. I think that Raymond, you obviously have a different perspective doing cards more full time. And then Brian, I'm not 100% sure on you, but
I'm just here.
So it'll be interesting just to kind of get a perspective on, your guys' perspective on how you see card shows and what you pick.
I actually have a quick question for Eric. How long have you been collecting?
So I collected as a kid, right? So I mean,
Right.
I think it's much like all of us, used to do baseball cards with my dad on the weekends. We'd go to swap meets, garage sales. That was back then where cards were in abundance and they were cheap, right? And
Right.
really, my dad was really into memorabilia, so really we ended up with Frank Thomas's signed bats, Ken Griffey Jr. So I grew up in Seattle, so obviously the Seattle quote unquote baseball icons were sort of my dad's bread and butter. So Alex Rodriguez, Ken Griffey Jr. We had signed mitts, signed baseball bats, balls, that sort of stuff. But I really got back into it sort of around the same time that the boom started, right? Like 4 years ago, really back into it. With basketball, right? Because that was kind of the top of mind, it was in the season, and that was where, some of the bigger eye-catching numbers in terms of card values went to. And so, yeah, that's when I sort of got back into it and started accumulating and, am where I am now. But, it's probably a very similar story to a lot of people listening and sort of most of the folks that show up at card shows these days.
Okay. Well, since you're talking about basketball, maybe it's a good segue to the season just starting out. I am a Magic fan, so anything I cheer about. I'm not really buying cards right now per se for basketball. But what has been the strategy for you all? And I'll give you kind of like my high level point of view, like just from face value. I'm noticing a lot of people are selling KD. I don't know if that's just something that I'm seeing. What do you guys have observed in the basketball season, like the start of the season so far?
I think that overall, at least like among like the relatively new players, like no one's had like any like crazy like 50-point games or anything. I mean, as a result, there's like not like a whole ton of activity for like at least the older cards. So I think our people are shifting back to like, Kobe. I think the Kobe market's even a little soft. Maybe like Jordan. I think is like people always want Jordan, and like a little bit of LeBron. Although I would say like relatively like LeBron market is a little bit soft from what I've seen from like auction prices. That's kind of my take. I've also noticed in the recent like golden auctions, like some of the modern cards ended low. For example, like I saw a Luka 2018 Purple Ice Prison on BGS 10.5 ended at 15K, which in the past I think would have been like, 20 something K card. So either like someone got a steal or, I think there's just too much going on, right? There's too many auctions happening in too many places. It's just impossible to juggle all the balls in the air, and as a result, some of the balls get dropped.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like this year, unlike last year, the card market's not moving quite as much like with performance. So I feel like last year, Zion or Ja would have a huge game and prices would tick up. And obviously I know Zion's injured this year, but I feel like similarly this year, Luka or Steph Curry could have a huge game, and last year cards would track up. And this year, whether it's just, I think people are getting smarter about it. They realize that people are going to try to quote unquote cash out when someone has a huge game. Like Steph Curry had a 50-point game the other night, right? Couldn't miss. And you start to see cards pop up, right? Steph Curry cards start to pop up on eBay, and people trying to take advantage of that. I think too many people in the past 12 months have been burned buying sort of at the peak of after a big performance, and then realizing that, hey, you could just wait 2 days and the hype would die back down and you could buy that card for 15% less. So, I think to your point with the golden comps, it's sort of like before you could catch really good timing and Luka could have a triple double and beat the Lakers, right? And that card would get 23,000. Whereas this year, even if that happened, I still think the card, it would do what it did where it ended for golden at 15K.
Yeah, actually, I feel like with Luka, do you think, see, this is from a soccer guy talking, do you think the expectations that collectors have for him, are collectors being a little bit more impatient? like saying, you know, there's better opportunities somewhere else? Or is it like just what you're saying? Maybe people are just getting burnt and they're not as confident yet with this season starting out.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall he's just like on a bad team. I don't think there's any other way to put it. And the second reason is like, I think generally like in order for like card values to sustain, like the player I think needs to win a ring, but not only win a ring, but like win it quickly, like early on in his career. Like you saw what happened with Giannis, right? He won a ring last year in his 7th season in the NBA. He didn't win it with a super team. You know, like on paper it was an amazing champion. Like I love like hearing that story, right? But like his card values, went up maybe like 5% and then like dropped a little bit maybe afterwards, right? So like to your point, like I agree, Brian. Like I think people are getting smarter about like
what Eric said it.
Like,
Eric said it, but I'll claim it though. I'll claim it though.
Brian, you said it as far as I know. So serious now.
There you go.
Serious now. People are getting smarter. I think the football market is and just changing topic. I think the football market is like a little bit more volatile. There's fewer games this season. Quarterback is more like one player is more important than like in like another sport, right? Like for example, like the other day on the Golden Auctions, I saw a Joe Burrow Contenders Optic Gold PSA 9 and at like $39K, which is a ridiculous price. I sold a BGS 9.5, the same card, for $21K just the week before. And it was just because he had a really good game. I think it was against the Ravens. So just like, stuff like that, I was like watching it and I was like, this is going pretty crazy. But I think the hype is eventually going to die down soon as well.
Yeah, that I think people will quickly learn because they're going to get burned. Because look at quarterback's obviously the only position that garners huge money, right, in football. And look at the Mahomes market, right? I mean, before the season started, Mahomes was on fire, and 8 subpar games. I mean, they're still right in the thick of things, right? That team can still turn it around, but you can see, I mean, his prices are cratering down back to earth, right? So I think people are starting to realize that it's such a performance based that I think they're going to do similar to what has been happening in the basketball market. They're going to take a more cautious approach going forward. But obviously, Burrow and Herbert are, they're hot right now, right? Every week we hear on ESPN and everyone's talking about those cards. And so hopefully, no one's left holding the bag on those guys.
But is it me or is it, I don't know. It feels like NFL right now is still really exciting. Like, is that just me, or I am a Bucs fan, so that does play a part. But no,
that helps.
Overall, though, I feel like there's a lot more names that are coming up. Like I think Raymond kind of put it, nailed it on the dot. Actually, just none of the young studs are really showing out that we didn't see coming. Like who's excited about Franz Wagner, right? He's like on the Magic, like he's good. But no one's like hyping it up. It's definitely more exciting when you have Joe Burrow leading Bengals. I mean, they lost to the Jets, but that's another story. But you see what I'm trying to say? I feel like that the whole entire Zion era, like when he first came into the league, really taught us a lot of things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm like looking at the records right now, and like the Chiefs are actually not bad.
No.
I think they're 5-4.
Yeah, they're right
the
in
Chargers
there.
are 5.
That's the thing is like you could buy Mahomes cards today, and if they win a Super Bowl, I mean, you're going to cash out pretty, right? So it's not like the team is not doing decently. It's just kind of that recency bias, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. That's a Raven. That's a Raven quote. I think Warren Buffett got it from Raven.
He was taking notes.
Yeah, but yeah, I think go ahead, Raymond. Sorry.
Oh, no, you continue. I was gonna change the topic.
Oh, I was gonna change the topic too. Let's go.
All right, I'll change it before you then. So
I go. You do it.
Yeah, so I know earlier before the show you were talking about how you approach buying and selling at card shows and trading cards for other cards, Brian.
Yeah.
We talked about like kind of like your strategy of like trading up or down, either direction for liquidity or value. What have you learned so far about that? And can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's funny that Eric was talking about how people are getting like showed out or burnout, right? And just funny that you talked about that because I did this little thing where I'm like, hey, you know what? Let me go to 4 shows in 4 weeks. And technically, I did 5 shows in 5 weeks. And that is real, you know? And I wanted to do an experiment to see how do people really, you know, help the bottom line, right? How do they profit out doing these shows? And when I first started going to shows, I was always looking for cash, you know, because everybody's saying cash is king. The problem is when you do get cash, yes, you could leverage, but to a certain extent. Like I feel like people are more interested if you could trade a card and throw in cash. And essentially what I've been noticing is I've been doing a lot of tables with the great curator, Daniel, and he does an excellent job on this. Like, first off, I think cross sports trading is such a hack. Like, if you could do all sports and you could cross into like different sports, like for example, trading basketball for, let's just say, F1, I feel like that's like you could crush some people in that type of deals. Another thing is I've been doing is buying cards at a certain value. Obviously, there's not that many comps on these cards. And then, you know, beefing the value up a little bit because to my perceived value, right? And it's easier for someone to accept a card at full eBay comps per se or at your value than saying, hey, I want your card for like 40% off for cash. That's what it feels like. And what I've been doing is basically just trading up. Like, so what you would do is you trade up for value. So I would buy something, a few raw cards, prospects, you know, find some cards that are pretty liquid, move into a bigger card and keep working my way up by throwing, you know, half cash, half trades. And then all of a sudden there's a point you're like, you know what, this card's like 5K, you know, for me, 5K is a lot. All right. 5K. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, maybe it's time to go back down. So what I would do is trade down, get a little bit of cash and get cards that are really liquid and then keep moving down, and just rinse and repeat the process. And that's what I've seen with Daniel. And that's what I've been doing the last few weeks. The first 2 weeks were really hard. Like I wasn't really getting that much action. And I realized I was just looking too much for cash. Right. And yeah, maybe you get cash, but then like, what do you do next? Is the tough part. So that's what my take has been the last 5 weeks. And I think it's something that should be talked about a little bit more.
Yeah, the idea of trading up and down, you know, in cycles is interesting to me. Like, I've never really heard anyone talk about that before. I don't know how, like, I don't really ask other collectors or dealers how they usually deal with that. Usually, like, I'll just trade down and then auction off the cards. Like the liquid cards.
Straight up.
That's the difference when you're a whale versus a little.
Yeah. I'm like a little peon right here, you know.
But I've noticed that is not a good strategy because I don't know why, but like auction prices, I feel like you know, don't end as high as I expected them most of the time. So for example, like, you know, I traded into a Shea Blue Ice Prism PSA 9 for 2.2K last week. Sent it off to auction. It sold for $900. Blue Prism for $1,500.
Own the L. That's how you do it, but buy high, sell low.
I got my cash. I cashed out, but at what cost, right? So so maybe like I think patience is the name of the game here, right? Like selling at the right time, but also like, you know, if you think about eBay auctions, right? You have to mail it to the, you know, I sell from consignment. You have to mail it to the consignment for 2 days, wait for the auction to run to end, 7 days, get paid out 2 days, right? Start to finish, it's probably like a 10-day process, and by then the hype has probably already died down, right?
Well,
I'm actually not really sure the right answer to it.
Is Shy liquid?
Prism is.
Yeah, decently liquid. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'm in like my own little world, and I don't know, because I was thinking maybe it's not as liquid, right? Like you trade down for 3 or 4 cards that you can move quickly. at the same face value basically at a show.
Yeah, and this sort of goes to kind of the topic, Raymond, you and I have talked a little bit about, is just like in terms of liquidity, right? It seems like everyone is not looking to, most people are just looking to trade plus cash, and they'd really like to just trade for trade. I think it's, pretty out there that like a lot of people are like card rich and like cash poor. And so when you talk about like the money circulating throughout a room, right, it's like a lot of people would like to sell their cards for cash, but realizing the values of their cards that they're sitting on, it's unrealistic to believe that you're going to be able to cash out in that room, right? And so, which is why Raymond goes the route of like, let me trade down to some stuff that's liquid and try to turn it into cash by consignment. But then you see what happens. You can take a pretty big L because he traded at 2.2K and he thought, well, I could take a little bit of an L, but I'd like to probably get 2K. And he ended up with less than 1,000. So yeah.
That's a whale, man. That's a whale move.
Yeah, Eric, I remember talking about that. It's like kind of like, at a show you see like one, you say for example, like you see one card, it moves to like one dealer to the other, and every single time that card increases in value as it moves from like dealer A to B to C.
Exactly.
Right? And then like all of a sudden, like the whole value, the whole market rises, right? Because one person just forking off the next at a higher price. I don't know what to think about that.
I mean, it is what it is, right? It is what it is.
It is what it is, yeah.
So,
but and it's like, who's the end consumer, right? Like
exactly. Yep. So it's like you have to find that collector that really wants that card, and I think that's really the venture with these shows. It's like, okay, well, I traded a holiday. I remember like buying. So what I would do before shows, like last 2 weeks, is buying stuff for like either raw or just prospects in soccer, for like 15% comps, because that's what people like to do. They're okay with doing that. But then I'll add my 15% comps on it when you trade. I guess people psychologically are okay with that for some reason, and it's been working so far.
So like psychologically for both of you, and either of you can answer, like why the difference between like cash value and trade value? So like when you quote someone like, hey, you could buy this card for $1,000 or I want to trade it for 1.5K. Like what I think it's just an interesting topic for people to hear, right? It's like everyone does that. And I think at some point someone started that like whole trade value and cash value. And so everyone just continues to do it. But I just like to hear like your perspective of like why the two values and what does that mean to you?
Raymond, do you want to answer this first? Like, I feel like you have a better articulated thoughts. For me, it's like I have like my go-to.
That's a good question, Eric. I think there's two main reasons. First is like there's a risk with like auctioning stuff off, right? So you kind of need some sort of wiggle room, like a premium to account for that risk, right? Kind of like in my case, right? But like, like I gave him extra trade value. His trade value was higher than the market value. Right, but like it was still like it still wasn't enough to compensate for the risk. And the second is eBay fees, right? Like if you cash stuff out, you're automatically take like a 10% cut, 13% cut. And there's probably some other reasons too, but yeah, I feel like those are the two main ones.
Yeah, one of my reasons is like, well, I'll tell them cash is once I get cash, it's easier to get into something, but then when it gets to a card, I have to do more work. Right. So it's like that 10% is like that extra work I have to do to cash out. And that would be like my argument essentially. And I don't know. It's just I feel better when I know, hey, you know what? At least I could. It feels different when you don't take any cash out. When you can just trade a card, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think though that's actually a really good way to articulate that issue. Because I've heard people try to explain it away all sorts of ways, but yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're trading card for card, you're more likely to give up a little more value because you're not having to reach into your pocket and add some liquidity to the deal.
Yeah. And also how another question I would always ask people, and it's just a genuine question, right? Because I don't want to kill them. Regardless, I would say, hey, are you in this for very high? Like just have an idea, like what's their mindset, what's their thought process? Like, okay, well, most time I'm genuine about it. Like if someone said they bought it really high and play, hey, listen, if you're willing to take this L, we could work with you. But like, if you're not, then I don't think I'm the person to be working with. But if there's sometimes they'll be like, well, I'm not in it for very, very much. That's easier to work with them because, you can build in values without killing each other. So
that's very interesting. I've never really thought about asking that question. Like, what are you into that card for?
Yeah. Well, no. Are you into it high? Are you into it high? Right. Like, I don't want to ask them exactly how much. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're humanizing the interaction, right? Because you're showing that, hey, I realize that you could have gotten to this card at any point in time, the top of the market or the bottom.
Yeah.
And it gives you some good information too, right? Because it's like the willingness to work with what you're trying to accomplish for that deal, right?
100%. Yeah. And you don't want to waste time, right? Like one of the first tips I've ever gotten at a show is that you have a finite time to make deals. You have a finite time. The last thing you want to do is end up trying to do this whole entire deal and then figuring out this guy was over 2x the high, right, at that value. And then it's just no way to work it out after an hour of negotiations.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the best deals from both sides are the ones that you find out in honestly in 5 minutes, right? Like once I dealt with MC Sports Cards and it was like a really big deal, but we figured, and I know it was longer than what he would have liked to negotiate for, but I still think that was very, very smooth, right? It took it was done in under 30 minutes, right? But I feel like someone else working on a smaller card could have got it done in 5 minutes, right? Just
100%. But let's move into probably the topic of the show. I know trading down, trading up, liquidity. It kind of talks about all the shows, but I think everybody went to the Dallas card show besides Raymond. Raymond, did you go?
Dude, I saw you there.
I didn't go, but I know Raymond was there.
Oh yeah, that's right. We ate in and out together. We ate in and out together. Yeah, never mind. And, it's funny. Raymond saved me from just being by myself too, because I didn't really have anybody, and thank God Raymond was like, "Yo, you want to go eat food and everything?" I'm like, "Thank God I have friends."
He's the guy that you had dinner with.
Yeah. I was like, "Who did I eat dinner with?" No, because you left the next morning, right? So that's why it kind of felt like you weren't there. But yeah, so let's talk about the Dallas Card Show.
I might as well just not be there, right?
That I really feel like the Dallas Card Show of all shows that happen on a regular basis really is elite, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe it's just the brand they have where all collectors that come together will find something that they want at the show. Do you agree?
I think so. Yeah. I think that I was talking with Eric Myers, who works for PWCC, and I think he was talking about how he started it 15 or 20 years ago. And just started with 15 tables, and now it's grown over those decades to 300 tables every month. So I think the history aspect plays a huge portion, right? You have both people who have entered the hobby and recently versus people who have been doing it for a long time, right? And then once you have those balanced people, that's what makes the show there to stay. Do you have a good time there, Brian?
I did. I really did, especially Friday night.
What was your favorite part about it?
Because we got to spend time together. Unforgettable time together. No, it was good, man. Trade night was good. One thing I will say, I'm not a big fan of card shows having music. Trade night was so loud with this music. I'm just bro, I'm trying to work out this deal, this soccer card deal. It's last thing I need to hear is freaking Jay-Z in the back of my my ears. But nothing wrong with Jay-Z. I like Jay-Z, by the way. It just nothing beats Dallas, man. Every time I go there, it just seems like everybody's willing to deal. Everybody's willing to do something. And I saw some F1 action too. So I was with Daniel, the great curator, and man, people are so passionate about F1. And Eric, I just want to ask this question. I don't know if I don't even pay attention. I watched the documentary. I know Lewis Hamilton. I know Schumacher, right? I know the Verstappen guy. The Verstappen guy. But someone kind of brought it up to me, and I just thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how that works. there's only a certain amount. Isn't there only like 20 drivers or something?
Yeah, because there's only 10 teams
Right.
as part of Formula One, and they each have 2 drivers on the grid.
My question is, how do you feel the longevity of this hype lasting, right? Because like it just seems like hype it's like just it's exciting.
Yeah.
But then again, there's only 20 drivers. Like, how much is it do we run into the Lucas situation all over again?
Yeah, no, I mean it's a good point. I mean, so to talk about drivers specifically, right? So Lewis Hamilton's obviously, he's like the Tom Brady of the sport, right? 7-time world champion, has all the records for winning at this point, right? And so, folks are obviously buying Lewis Hamilton in terms of the F1 product from Topps because it's the first, it's the first one out. It's the flagship Topps Chrome. So I think Lewis Hamilton cards are always going to be, a good investment, something good to hold. But you're right in terms of the other drivers, right? Because there are only 20 seats and the turnover is high, right? Because in Formula One, like any other sport, right? If you don't perform, you get replaced. And at the end of the day, it's all about the money, right? So it's either you're performing and so you keep your seat and you get that continuity that way. Or, Formula One teams, it's expensive, right, to run a Formula One operation. And a lot of teams take on sponsors. And, in some cases, drivers come with sponsors, in terms of like there are some overseas drivers, like, Russian drivers that bring some of their own endorsement money to the Formula One grids and the teams. So they're not necessarily the first choice to end up in a seat, but they end up getting in that seat because of that fact. But yeah, you're right. There's really like 5 guys right now where the values are tremendously high and strong, and they have strong markets based on their future potential. And, Verstappen's one of them, right? He's a really young guy driving for Red Bull. He's looking likely to win the championship this year.
That's it. Okay.
So that will, sort of like when you talk about a catalyst for what the cards are going to do, I think some of that's built in, but I think once he actually, if he does put his hands around that trophy, you certainly will see a bump in terms of his card values. And then realistically, like as drivers move, good drivers move from different teams. Obviously Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari. I mean, those are kind of like the top tier teams. And so as drivers from like the lower teams move up potentially to those sorts of seats, you could see some, card market movement in that regard. But it'll be interesting to see because it's really like just like first year Prism, this is first year, Topps Chrome, right, for these drivers. And so it'll be interesting to see as they release, the next release comes out and for the 2022 season essentially in December. So it'll be interesting to see sort of what those card values do and how kind of the market continues to progress. But right now it's, we're sort of like, it feels like every day is a new high for Formula One. And so you start to get worried a little bit, right? In terms of like, are you buying in sort of at the top of the market now, or is there still room for growth?
Do you feel the prices are justifiable right now?
The prices are justifiable because the wax prices have gone crazy, right? So when the Formula One Topps Chrome boxes came out, you could buy them for $450. Today, you'll be hard pressed to buy a loose box for $2,000. And so, consumer with that, it's like you've seen single prices rise to levels to validate the prices of the wax. So right now, I think that the two are in line because there are huge enough cards that you can get out of those boxes to justify the pricing. But it's just like Prism basketball was,
I see.
14 months from now, right? Zion Jai, your Prism basketball hobby was crazy. It was on fire. Like the boxes went, they came out at, $600 and then they rose to $4,000. And then now they've kind of settled back in the middle. So I expect the same thing, right? With this sport, I think, at some point you'll get to this inflection point of, okay, how much further can it go up? And then it'll come back down and kind of settle down at a decent rate that's higher than what they originally came out at.
Yeah, and sorry, I know you probably have thoughts, but I have more questions now. Eric, this is like really good stuff because some people are just like, it's going to the freaking moon. And it probably is. It's just like, we've seen this before, and it's hard when you're in the thick of it to realize it. But I also have a quick question. Do they have a set date for the next Topps Chrome? Like, is it for next season or something like that, or is that?
Yeah, they do have the next Topps Chrome coming out, so essentially the next year's version of it, and it's supposed to release sometime in December. I believe it was sometime in November, and then it got pushed back for production reasons. So yeah, they will have another set coming. So we will soon get another data point on how strong the market actually is. Because again, like I said, this feels like first year Prism, and those prices are strong. Then as newer releases come, like how do those cards hold value of similar drivers, right? Like so now we're talking about a second year Lewis Hamilton, a second year Verstappen versus like effectively a rookie year Lewis Hamilton Topps Chrome.
Right. Okay. That's my interrogation. I'm done.
Values aside, what's your favorite F1 product?
My favorite F1 product is probably Topps Dynasty. So yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with like Topps Dynasty for baseball because they've been doing that for many years. But they did a Topps Dynasty, which is essentially one card, right? One thick card, autographed per box. And so obviously those cards are expensive, right? So they, when they originally came out, those boxes were $1,000 each, and now they're going for like 3,500 ish for one card. And so there's high risk, high reward, right? Because you could get a Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton will probably be, lower end or higher numbered, I would say. Lewis Hamilton card would probably get you 15,000 plus. But you can also get a team principal or team manager, if you will, and those cards are $100, right? So that's a huge L, right? You pay $3,000 for a box, and you get a team principal, and that card's worth $150, right? Huge L.
That's
are all
crazy.
Cards in that set like patch autos?
Yeah, everything's like a patch auto or like a memorabilia auto. So like a glove auto.
Oh, that'd be sick.
Yeah, so the glove auto is actually pretty cool. If you've never seen them, just go on eBay and take a look. I think there was one listed on eBay, Lewis Hamilton one, and they were asking like $125,000 or something for it, or best offer.
Dude, these are really cool, actually. I would love to I see a Verstappen 40,000. It literally looks like flawless to me. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's exactly
I'm a
like that. Yeah, it's like flawless. It's it's like national treasures, sort of that deal, right?
I wonder if they're gonna come with soccer with this one. Like, what are they waiting for? Like, this is sick.
Yeah,
and these are like race worn.
They're
race
race worn essentially. Yeah. And then for the team principals, the dress shirts they were wearing during race.
No, really? Really?
The button.
Yeah, the button, the button from their Prada, dress shirt that we were wearing.
Logo man. That's a logo man for for the managers. Okay, that's really cool. That's good stuff because I like Formula 1 like in general, just because the documentary, you know how it is, right? The documentary just looks badass. So you're just like, damn, I like this. But yeah, so it's good that you have. It seems like you kind of have a good perspective on Formula 1, whereas like I would feel like it could get scary if someone just thinks that it always goes up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that happened to me in soccer, right? Like I remember how the soccer boom came out of nowhere, and I was just like, will it slow down? But it always slows down. So
yeah, I love Topps Dynasty. The patches look really, really cool.
Yeah,
I think what's also really cool is like a lot of the autos are bad, so like the good ones I think are extra cool. I like it when like not all the autos are good for some reason.
Dude, that's crazy. But okay, do we have anything else that we want to talk about Dallas or anything else?
I think that's it. Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Yeah, we went through a lot. We went through a lot in this episode. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot. Learned a lot from both of you. It was a pleasure having you.
I'm sorry. I see a Christian Horner. Like that's the
team principal. Yeah.
Yo, that's sick. I like this guy, the Red Bull guy.
Yeah, I think he's married to a Spice Girl too. So he's like the dream.
Okay. All right. But anyway, sorry, Raymond. I
We'll edit
interrupted
this.
your
We'll,
wrap
we'll,
up.
we'll edit this part out, Eric, so that you're.
Sorry, I
you're
just got
welcome
so
to
super. I
hearing
got
that.
super like, dude, you get it for $187. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's the thing about Topps Dynasty, right? Like you could take a huge L, or you could end up, hitting a 6-figure card. So it's sort of just it's luck, like anything, right? It's sort of luck of the draw. But yeah, I mean, I think Lewis Hamilton, people will tell you like Lewis Hamilton is Tom Brady of the sport,
Of course,
right?
yeah.
So, I think as the years go on, I think those values of those cards will just start to continue to tick up, just like they did for TV12. So
Okay, cool. Sorry, Raymond. You could go. You could do the wrap up now.
All good. And I'm just looking at the interesting. Yeah, the patches look really cool. I mean, all of them are kind of different. It seems like Topps actually tried for these ones. But yeah, it was a pleasure having you on today, Eric. Learning about F1 and your experience at shows, and you'll have to tell us about what happens in Chicago in about a week or two.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll be going to the show, so I'll let you know what kind of action we see. People are probably showed out, like I said, from Dallas already, but appreciate you guys having me on. It's been fun talking all things sports.
Do you have an Instagram or anything that you want to plug, Eric?
Sure. You guys can follow me. It's just I use my personal Instagram for cards as well. So it's just EHA8.8. So shoot me a follow. I don't have as much content, obviously, as you famous card folks here. You've card celebrities. So
yeah, Raymond.
I'm not the one who carries the camera around at shows filming things. So
very true.
Cool.
But
let's wrap it up. I know you guys are busy. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and hope you guys have a great rest of your weeks.
Sweet.